9.3 The World of Work, Learning Objectives. How do adolescents select an occupation? What is the impact of part time employment on adolescents? When 15-year-old Aaron announced that he wanted an after school job at a local supermarket, his mother was delighted, believing that he would learn much from the experience. 5 months later, she had her doubts. Aaron had lost interest in school, and they argue constantly about how he spends his money. What do you want to be when you grow up? Children are often asked this question in fun. Beginning in adolescence, however, it takes on special significance because work is such an important element of the adult life that is looming on the horizon. A job, be it a bricklayer, reporter, or childcare worker, helps define who we are. In this section, we'll see how adolescents begin to think about possible occupations. We'll also look at adolescents' first exposure to the world of work, which usually occurs in the form of part-time jobs after school or on weekends. As we do, we'll see if Aaron's changed behavior is typical of teens who work part-time. Career development. In most developed nations, adolescence is a time when youth face the challenge of selecting a career. According to a theory proposed by Donald Super, identity is a primary force in an adolescent's choice in career. At about age 13 or 14, adolescents use their emerging identity as a source of ideas about careers, a process called crystallization. Teenagers use their ideas about their own talents and interests to limit potential career prospects. A teenager who is extroverted and sociable may decide that working with people would be the career for him. Decisions are provisional, and adolescents experiment with hypothetical careers, trying to envision what each might be like. Discussions with parents help adolescents refine their emerging ideas. Schools also help by providing job fairs and assessing students' job related interests. At about age 18, adolescents extend the activities associated with crystallization and enter a new phase. During specification, individuals further limit their career possibilities by learning more about specific lines of work and by starting to obtain the training required for a specific job. The extroverted teenager who wants to work with people may decide that a career in sales would be a good match for his abilities and interests. The teen who likes math may have learned more about careers and decided she'd like to be an accountant. Some teens may begin an apprenticeship as a way to learn a trade. The end of the teenage years or the early 20s marks the beginning of the third phase. During implementation, individuals enter the workforce and learn firsthand about jobs. This is a time of learning about responsibility and productivity, of learning to get along with coworkers, and of altering one's lifestyle to accommodate work. This period is often unstable. Individuals may change jobs frequently as they adjust to the reality of life in the workplace. In the Real People feature, you can see these three phases in one young woman's career development. Quote, "The life of Lynn illustrates the progressive refinement that takes place in a person's career development. An initial interest in math and finance led to a degree in which business, which led to a job as an accountant. However, one other aspect of Lynn's life sheds more light on Super's theory. After 18 months on the job, Lynn's accounting group was merged with another. This would have required Lynn to move to another state, so she quit. After 6 months looking for another accounting job, Lynn gave up and began to study to become a real estate agent. The moral, economic conditions, and opportunities also shape career development. Changing times can force individuals to take new, often unexpected career paths. Personality type theory. Super's work helps to explain how self-concept and career aspirations develop hand in hand, but it does not explain why particular individuals are attracted to one line of work rather than another. Explaining the match between people and occupations has been the aim of a theory devised by John Holland. According to Holland's personality type theory, people find work fulfilling when the important features of a job or profession fit the worker's personality. Holland identified 6 prototypic personalities that are relevant to the world of work. Each one is best suited to a specific set of occupations as indicated on the right-hand column of Table 9.4. Table 9.4, personality types in Holland's theory. So personality types are realistic, investigative, social, conventional, enterprising, and artistic. So realistic, the description. Individuals enjoy physical labor and working with their hands. They like to solve concrete problems. Careers that work for this type are mechanic, truck driver, construction worker. Investigative. This individual are task oriented and enjoy thinking about abstract relations. Careers that suit this type are scientists or technical writers. Social. These individuals are skilled verbally and interpersonally. They enjoy solving problems using these skills. Careers that suit this type are teacher, counselor, social worker. Conventional. These individuals have verbal and quantitative skills that they like to apply to structured, well-defined tasks assigned to them by others. This can include a bank teller, payroll clerk, or a traffic manager. Enterprising. Individuals enjoy using their verbal skills in positions of power, status, and leadership. These can include business executives, television producers, or real estate agents. And then there is the artistic. These individuals enjoy expressing themselves through unstructured tasks. This can be things like poets, musicians, or actors. Remember, these are merely prototypes. Most people do not match any one personality type exactly. Instead, their work-related personalities are a blend of the 6. This model is useful in describing the career preferences of African, Asian, European, Native, and Latino American adolescents. When people have jobs that match their personality type, in the short run, they are more productive employees, and in the long run, they have more stable career paths. For example, an enterprising youth is likely to be successful in business because he will enjoy positions of power in which he can use his verbal skills. Of course, there's more to job satisfaction than the match between personality type and important features of a job. Even when people are well matched to a job, some will find the work more satisfying than others because of a host of factors, including pay, stress in the workplace, and frequency of conflict between work and family obligations. Nevertheless, the person job match is a good place to start thinking about vocation. Combining Holland's work related personality types with Super's theory of career development gives us a comprehensive picture of vocational growth. While Super's theory explains the developmental progression by which individuals translate general interests into a specific career, Holland's theory explains what makes a good match between specific interests and specific careers. Of course, trying to match interests to occupations can be difficult. Fortunately, several tests can be used to describe a person's work-related personality and the jobs for which he or she is best suited. In the Strong Interests Inventory, or the SII, for example, people express their liking of different occupations, school subjects, activities, and types of people. For example, the elderly or people who live dangerously. These answers are compared to responses obtained from a representative sample of individuals from different occupations. If you are still undecided about a career, we encourage you to visit your college's counseling center to arrange to take a test like the SII. The results will help you to focus on careers that would match your interests and help you to choose a college major that would lead to those careers. Even if you are fairly certain of your vocational plans, you might take one of these tests anyway. As we saw with Lynn, career development does not end with the first job. People continuously refine their career aspirations over a lifespan, and these test results might be useful later in your life. Part-time employment. Today, about 25% of high school freshmen have a part-time job, and about 75% of high school seniors do. About two-thirds of youth work in retail, and half of those working in retail are employed in the food and beverage industry. Most adults praise teens for working, believing that early exposure to the workplace teaches adolescents self-discipline, self-confidence, and important job skills. For most adolescents, however, the reality is quite different. Part-time work can actually be harmful for several reasons. 1. School performance suffers. 2. Mental health and behavioral problems. 3. Misleading affluence. So, 1. School performance suffers. When students work more than approximately 20 hours per week, they become less engaged in school and are less likely to be successful in college. Many high school students apparently do not have the foresight and discipline necessary to consistently meet the combined demands of work and school. 2. Mental health and behavioral problems. Adolescents who work long hours, more than 15 or 20 hours a week, are more likely to experience anxiety and depression, and their self-esteem often suffers. Many adolescents find themselves in jobs that are repetitive and boring but stressful, and such conditions undermine self-esteem and breed anxiety. Extensive part-time work frequently leads to substance abuse and frequent problem behavior, such as theft and cheating in school. Why employment is associated with these problems is not clear. Perhaps employed adolescents turn to drugs to help them cope with anxiety and depression brought on by work. Arguments with parents may become more common because anxious, depressed adolescents are more prone to argue, or because wage-earning adolescents may believe that their freedom should match their income. Whatever the exact mechanism, extensive part-time work is clearly detrimental to the mental health of most adolescents. 3. Misleading affluence. Adults sometimes argue that work is good for teenagers because it teaches them to, quote, value the dollar. But in reality, the typical teenage pattern is to earn and spend. Working adolescents spend most of their earnings on themselves to buy clothing, snack food, or cosmetics, and to pay for entertainment. Few working teens set aside much of their income for future goals such as college education or use it to contribute to their family's expenses. Because parents customarily pay for many of the essential expenses associated with truly independent living, rent, utilities, and groceries, for example, working adolescents often have much higher percentage of their income available for discretionary spending than do working adults. Thus, for many teens, part time work experience provides unrealistic expectations about how income can be allocated. The message that emerges repeatedly from research on part time employment is hardly encouraging. Like Aaron, the teenage boy in the vignette, adolescents who work long hours at part time jobs do not benefit from the experience. To the contrary, they do worse in school and are more likely to have behavioral problems and learn how to spend money rather than how to manage it. These effects are similar for adolescents in different ethnic groups and are comparable for boys and girls. Ironically, though, there is a long-term benefit. Young adults who had a stressful part-time job as an adolescent are better able to cope with stressful adult jobs. Does this mean that teenagers who are still in school should never work part-time? Not necessarily. Part-time employment can be a good experience depending on the circumstances. One key is the number of hours of work. Although the exact number of hours varies from one student to the next, most students could easily work 5 hours weekly without harm, and many could work 10 hours weekly. Another key is the type of job. When adolescents have jobs that allow them to use their skills, for example, bookkeeping, computing, or typing, and acquire new ones, self esteem is enhanced and they learn from their work experience. Yet, another factor is how teens spend their earnings. When they save their money or use it to pay for clothes or school expenses, their parent child relationships often improve. By these criteria, who is likely to show the harmful effects of part time work? A teen who spends 30 hours a week bagging groceries and spends most of it on CDs or videos. Who is likely to benefit from part time work? A teen who likes to tinker with cars and spends Saturdays working in a repair shop, setting aside some of his earnings for college. Finally, summer jobs typically do not involve conflict between work and school. Consequently, many of the harmful effects associated with part time employment during the school year do not hold for summer employment. In fact, much employment becomes in fact, such employment sometimes enhances adolescents' self esteem, especially when they save part of their income for future plans. Nine point four, the dark side. Learning objectives. Why do teenagers drink and use drugs? What are some what leads some adolescents to become depressed, and how can depression be treated? What are the causes of juvenile delinquency? Rod was an excellent student and a starter in his high school basketball team. He was looking forward to going to the senior prom with Peggy, his longtime girlfriend, and then going to the state college with her in the fall. Then, without a hint that anything was wrong with their relationship, Peggy dropped Rod and moved in with the drummer of a local rock band. Rod was stunned and miserable. Without Peggy, life meant so little. Basketball in college seemed pointless. Some days Rod wondered if he should just kill himself to make the pain go away. Some young people do not adapt well to the new demands and responsibility of adolescence and respond in ways that are unhealthy. In this last section of Chapter 9, we look at three problems, often interrelated, that create the three Ds of adolescent development: drugs, depression, and delinquency. As we look at these problems, you'll understand why Rod feels so miserable without Peggy. Drug use, teenage drinking. Teen use of illicit drugs like cocaine and methamphetamine often make headlines, but in reality, most adolescents avoid drugs with one glaring exception: alcohol. About two-thirds of U.S. high school seniors have drunk alcohol within the past year, and about nearly half report that they've been drunk. What determines whether an adolescent joins the majority who drink? At least three factors are important: parents, peers, and stress. So, parents. Teens are more likely to drink when when drinking is an important part of parents' social lives, for example, stopping at a bar after work, and B, when parents are relatively uninvolved in teenagers' life or set arbitrary or unreasonable standards for their teens. Peers. Many adolescents drink because their peers do and so exert pressure on them to join the group. Stress. Like adults, many adolescents drink to cope with stress. Teens who report frequent life stress, problems with parents, with interpersonal relationships, or at school are more likely to drink and to drink more often. Because teenage drinking has so many causes, no single approach is likely to eliminate alcohol abuse. Adolescents who drink to reduce their tension can profit from therapy designed to teach them more effective means of coping with stress. School-based programs that are interactive, featuring student-led discussions, can be effective in teaching the facts about drinking and strategies for resisting peer pressure to drink. Stopping teens from drinking before it becomes habitual is essential because adolescents who drink are at risk for becoming alcohol dependent, depressed, or anxious as adults. Teenage smoking. Approximately a third of American teens experiment with cigarette smoking at some point in their teenage years. American teenagers who smoke typically begin sometime between 6th and ninth grade. As was true for teenage drinking, parents and peers are influential in determining whether youth smoke. When parents smoke, their teenage children are more likely to smoke too. But the parent-child relationship also contributes. Teens are less likely to smoke when they experience the supportive parenting associated with authoritative parenting. Like parents, peer influence can be direct and indirect. Teenagers more often smoke when their friends do. However, a more subtle influence of peers on teen smoking comes from informal school norms. When most students in a school think it's okay to smoke, even though many of them do not themselves smoke, teens are more likely to start smoking. The dangers of cigarettes smoking for adults are well known. Many teenagers, particularly those that smoke, are convinced that cigarette smoking is harmless for healthy adolescents, but they're absolutely wrong. Smoking can interfere with the growth of the lungs, and when teens smoke, they more often have a variety of health problems such as respiratory illness. What's more, smoking is often the fateful first step on a path to abuse of more powerful substances, including alcohol, marijuana, and cocaine. Faced with these many harmful consequences of teenage smoking, healthcare professionals and human development researchers have worked hard to create effective programs to discourage adolescents from smoking. In fact, just as comprehensive school-based programs can reduce teenage sex, such programs are effective in reducing teenage smoking. These programs typically include many common features. Schools have no smoking policies for all students, staff, and school visitors. The program provides information about short and long-term health social consequences for smoking and provides students with effective ways to respond to peer pressure to smoke. The program goes beyond the school to involve parents and communities. These programs can reduce teenage smoking by more than a third, but they have been implemented in only a handful of schools. By encouraging more schools to provide comprehensive anti-smoking programs, we could continue to reduce the number of teens who start to smoke. Depression. The challenges of adolescence can lead some youth to become depressed. When suffering from depression, adolescents have pervasive feelings of sadness, are irritable and have low self-esteem, sleep poorly, and are unable to concentrate. About 5 to 15% of adolescents are depressed. Adolescent girls are more often affected than boys, probably because social challenges in adolescence are often greater for girls than boys. Research reveals that unhappiness, anger, irritation often dominate the lives of depressed adolescents. They believe that family members, friends, and classmates are not friendly to them, and they are often extremely lonely. Rather than being satisfying and rewarding, life is empty and joyless for depressed adolescents. Depression is often triggered when adolescents experience a serious loss, disappointment, or failure, such as the death of a loved one, or when a much anticipated date turns out to be a fiasco. Think back to Rod, the adolescent in the vignette at the beginning of the section. His girlfriend had been the center of his life. When she left him unexpectedly, he felt helpless to control his own destiny. Similarly, an athlete may play poorly in the championship game because of illness, or a high school senior may get a lower score on the SAT exam because of the family crisis the night before taking the test. In each case, the adolescent could do nothing to avoid an undesirable result. Of course, many adolescents and adults experience negative events like these, but most don't become depressed. Why? One contributing factor is temperament. Children who are less able to regulate their emotions are, as adolescents, more prone to depression. Another factor is a belief system in which adolescents see themselves in an extremely negative light. Depression-prone adolescents are, for example, more likely to blame themselves for failure. Thus, after the disappointing date, the depression-prone teen is likely to think, quote, "I acted like a fool," instead of placing blame elsewhere by thinking, "Gee, he was a real jerk." Parents and families can also put an adolescent at risk for depression. Not surprisingly, adolescents more often become depressed when their parents are emotionally distant and uninvolved, and when family life is stressful due to economic disadvantage or marital conflict. And because African American and Hispanic adolescents more often live in poverty, they're more often depressed. Finally, when parents rely on punitive discipline, hitting and shouting, adolescents often resort to negative attributions like blaming themselves that can lead to depression. Heredity also plays a role, putting some adolescents at greater risk for depression. Neurotransmitters may be the underlying mechanism. Some adolescents may feel depressed because lower levels of neurotransmitters make it difficult for them to experience happiness, joy, and other pleasurable emotions. Treating depression. To treat depression, some adolescents take antidepressant drugs designed to correct imbalances in neurotransmitters. However, Drug treatment has no lasting effects. It only works while people are taking the drugs, and it has been linked to increased risk of suicide. Consequently, psychotherapy is a better choice for treating depressed adolescents. One common approach emphasizes cognitive and social skills. Adolescents learn how to have rewarding social interactions and to interpret them appropriately. These treatments are effective, and depressed adolescents do need help. Left untreated, depression can interfere with performance in school and social relationships and may also lead to recurring depression in adulthood. Also effective are prevention programs. They can substantially reduce the number of depressive episodes in high-risk youth. Preventing teen suicides. Suicide is the third most frequent cause of death after accidents and homicide among U.S. adolescents. Roughly 10% of adolescents report having attempted suicide at least once, but only 1 in 10,000 actually commit suicide. Suicide is rare before 15 years of age, and it is uncommon in girls throughout adolescence. Suicide is far more frequent in older adolescent boys, but the rates differ across ethnic groups. Native American teenage boys have the highest suicide rate by far. Asian Americans and African Americans have the lowest rates. Depression is one frequent precursor to suicide. Substance abuse is another. Few suicides are truly spontaneous, and in most cases there are warning signals. Here are some common signs: threats of suicide, preoccupation with death, change in eating or sleeping habits, loss of interest in activities that were once important, marked changes in personality, persistent feelings of gloom and helplessness, giving away valued possessions. If someone you know shows these signs, don't ignore them in the hope that they're not for real. Instead, ask the person if he or she is planning to hurt himself or herself. Be calm and supportive, and if the person appears to have made preparations to commit suicide, don't leave him or her alone. Stay with the person until other friends or relatives can come. More important, insist that the adolescent seek professional help. Therapy is essential to treat feelings of depression and hopelessness that give rise to thoughts of suicide. Delinquency. Shoplifting, selling cocaine, murder. Adolescents who commit acts like these, which are illegal as well as destructive to themselves or others, are engaged in juvenile delinquency. Adolescents are responsible for much of the criminal activity committed in the United States. For example, adolescents account for about 15% of all arrests for violent crimes, and ethnic minority youth are more likely to be arrested for violent crimes. Causes for delinquency. Why is delinquent behavior so common among adolescents? It is important to distinguish two kinds of delinquent behavior. The most common form is relatively mild. Adolescent limited antisocial behavior refers to relatively minor criminal acts by adolescents who aren't consistently antisocial. These youth may become involved in petty crimes such as shoplifting or using drugs, but may be careful to follow all school rules. As the name implies, their antisocial behavior is short-lived, usually vanishing in late adolescence or early adulthood. A second form of delinquent behavior is far more serious and fortunately much less common. Life course persistent antisocial behavior refers to antisocial behavior that emerges at an early age and continues throughout life. These individuals may start with hitting at 3 years of age and progress to shoplifting at age 12 and then to car theft at age 16. Perhaps only 5% of youth fit this pattern of antisocial behavior, but they account for most adolescent criminal activity. Researchers have identified several factors that contribute to this type of antisocial and delinquent behavior. 1. Biological contributions. 2. Cognitive processes. 3. Family processes. 4. Poverty. Biological contributions. Born to Be Bad is the title of at least 2 movies, 2 CDs, one by George Thorogood and one by Joan Jett, and 3 books. Implicit in this popular title is the idea that from birth some individuals follow a developmental track that leads to destructive, violent, or criminal behavior. In other words, the claim is that biology pushes people to be aggressive long before experience can affect development. Is there any truth to this idea? In fact, biology and heredity do contribute to aggressive and violent behavior, but not in the manner suggested by the epithet born to be bad. Twin studies make it clear that heredity contributes. Identical twins are usually more alike in their levels of physical aggression than are fraternal twins. But these studies do not tell us that aggression per se is inherited. Instead, they indicate that some children inherit factors that place them at risk for aggressive or violent behavior. Temperament seems to be one such factor. Youngsters who are temperamentally difficult, overly emotional, or inattentive are, for example, more likely to be aggressive. Hormones represent another factor. Boys with higher levels of the hormone testosterone are often more irritable and have greater body mass. A third factor is a deficit in neurotransmitters that inhibit aggressive behavior. None of these factors, temperament, testosterone, or neurotransmitters, causes a child to be aggressive, but they do make aggressive behavior more likely. For instance, children who are emotional and easily irritated may be disliked by their peers and be in frequent conflict with them, opening the door for aggressive responses. Thus, biological factors place children at risk for aggression. To understand which children actually become aggressive, we need to look at interactions between inherited factors and children's experiences. Number 2, cognitive processes. The perceptual and cognitive skills described in chapters 6 and 8 also play a role in antisocial behavior. Adolescent boys often respond aggressively because they are not skilled at interpreting other people's intentions. Without a clear interpretation in mind, they respond aggressively by default. That is, aggressive boys far too often think, quote, "I don't know what you're up to," and when in doubt, attack. Antisocial adolescents are often inclined to act impulsively, and they often are unable or unwilling to postpone pleasure. Seeking a fancy new CD player or a car, delinquent youth are tempted to steal it simply so that they can have it right now. When others inadvertently get in their way, delinquent adolescents often respond without regard to the nature of the person's acts or intentions. 3. Family processes. Delinquent behavior is often related to inadequate parenting. Adolescents are much more likely to become involved in delinquent acts when their parents use harsh discipline or don't monitor effectively. Parents may also contribute to delinquent behavior if their marital relationship is marked by constant conflict. When parents constantly argue and fight, their children are much more likely to be antisocial. Of course, children have ringside seats for many of the confrontations, and thus they can see firsthand how parents use verbal and physical aggression against each other. And sadly, children come to believe that their parents, that these patterns of interacting represent, quote, natural ways of solving problems. 4. Poverty. Aggressive and antisocial behavior is more common among children living in poverty than among children who are economically advantaged. As we have seen, living in poverty is extremely stressful for parents and often parental leads to the very parental behaviors that promote aggression, harsh discipline, and lax monitoring. In addition, violent crime is far more common in poverty-stricken neighborhoods. Older children and adolescents exposed to such violence as they get older more likely to be aggressive and violent themselves. Obviously, many factors contribute to make some adolescents prone to violent behavior. As you can imagine, when risk factors mount up in children's lives, they are at ever greater risk for aggressive behavior. What's more, many of the factors operate in a cascade fashion, such that later risk factors build on prior factors. Poverty or maternal depression can lead to harsh, ineffective parenting. In turn, this leads children to be unprepared for school, both academically and socially, which leads to school failure and conduct problems. These difficulties cause some parents to become less active and less invested in parenting, which means they monitor their adolescents less often, allowing them to associate with deviant, aggressive peers. Thus, the developmental journey that leads to a violent, aggressive, antisocial adolescent starts in early childhood but gains momentum along the way. Consequently, efforts to prevent children from taking this path must begin early, be maintained over childhood, and target children and their parents. An example of a successful intervention program is Fast Tracked Conduct Problems Prevention Research Group 2011, which is designed to teach academic and social skills to elementary school children, plus life and vocational skills to adolescents. In addition, parents are taught skills for effective child rearing and later how to stay involved with their children and monitor their behavior. At 12th grade, 2 years after the program has ended, aggressive and destructive behavior among children who were at the highest risk in kindergarten was cut in half compared to similar high-risk children assigned to a controlled condition. Of course, this sort of successful program comes with a very expensive price tag. But the costs of prevention programs are a fraction of the costs associated with the byproducts of aggressive behavior. One analysis suggests that each violent and aggressive American adolescent costs 2 to 5 million in payment to victims, court costs, and costs of incarceration. Thus, programs such as Fast Track not only improve children's lives and the lives of people around them, but they're also cost effective.